Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Liverpool.com podcast on the Blood Red Network. I'm your host this afternoon, Michael Plant, and I'm joined today by Richard Garnett on what is a very busy day of Liverpool news. But before we jump into all of that, a message to start with from our sponsor. Our sponsor is NordVPN, who have a new app available for download, which will allow you reliable and affordable internet access for your trip abroad. Saily is a new eSIM service app brought to you by the creators of NordVPN. Here you can choose from several affordable eSIM data plans in over 200 destinations, and with Saily's eSIM, you will always have a connection when needed. Download Saily in your app store and use our code BLOODRED at checkout to get an exclusive 15% off on your first purchase. For more information, please go to our episode description box for further details and click on the link. Yes, so that was an important one. I've taken over from Matt the first time reading that out, and spinning plates. It went all right, didn't it? But Rich, how are you on those things? And how are you on this very busy day of Liverpool news?
I'm not too bad, mate. Yeah, I'm not too bad. The sun is shining. And the Liverpool transfer merry-go-round continues on the pitch and off it, as it turns out.
Well, yeah, we'll jump straight into that with the news. Of course, that Jarell Quansah has left Liverpool this afternoon. He's left in a fee of initially £30 million plus £5 million in add-ons, joining Bayer Leverkusen from Liverpool. Not a surprise, one that we knew that was coming. We reported on Liverpool.com a couple of weeks ago, actually. The talks were quite advanced. And I think the fact that actually Quansah went so deep into the under-21 Euros with England and, of course, ultimately won the competition, but they did hold up the transfer a little bit. I think probably had he gone out in, let's say, the quarterfinals, this transfer would have gone through a little bit quicker. But Rich, what's your thoughts on that? Obviously, the big transfer news of the day, I suppose.
Well, kept his fee up probably, didn't it? Winning the under-21s Euros, so that's not a bad thing. So it's news that we were expecting, but only because we've kind of known about this for a little while now. I think if you'd said to me sort of before the end of the season, Jarell Quansah is going to leave Liverpool, I don't think I'd have been convinced, to be honest with you. So although we knew this was coming, it is surprising in one sense. Probably a good move for him in terms of, obviously it's difficult to break into that Liverpool centre-back pairing and hold down a place on a regular basis, especially given the calibre of the players ahead of him. And obviously, Liverpool have got a pretty decent fee out of it as well. So probably a good move for both parties in that sense. But of course, at the same time, it does leave Liverpool with a vacuum to fill. And it's not going to be easy. We know the name in the frame, but there's no guarantee that that's what it's going to be. And if that doesn't come to fruition, where do you go from there? So yeah, there's still plenty of questions to be answered, I think.
Yeah, we'll come to potential additions in a second, but I should have said at the outset there that Quansah as well, an important part of the transfer is that Liverpool have put in a buyback clause as well, which I think is a really interesting element of this transfer. And I suppose something I've touched on in the last couple of episodes, for me, it's a kind of a everyone wins situation really, and that Quansah can go away, develop at a Champions League club, play regularly, and of course he is Leverkusen's record signing, joining for the fee that he has signed for. And I think from a Liverpool perspective, they can essentially allow their fourth choice centre-back to leave for at least £30 million, see how he develops over the next couple of years, and then make a decision to perhaps bring him back, which would be really intriguing prospect. And then I suppose from Leverkusen's end, they are buying certainly one of the best young English defenders on the market, and he can hopefully develop over the next couple of years and can continue to progress, I suppose, to an elite level centre-back, which is certainly the path that Liverpool saw him on only a couple of years ago, but he did have that disappointing campaign last year under Arne Slot. Only actually started one Premier League game in his preferred role before the title was wrapped up. That was on the opening weekend of the season. And of course, it only lasted 45 minutes. Sort of 4 games in the league overall. One was a right back, and then 2 after the title was wrapped up. So, yeah, I think a frustrating season for him, obviously, but I think he showed in the Euros that if he is given a run in the team, he can really develop and can really playing an elite and a high level. So I think that's probably what everyone is hoping for, really, in terms of that transfer. But you did touch on additions. What are your thoughts on the makeup of the squad now? And do you think Liverpool have to go into the transfer market rich to bring in a new centre-back?
Well, the short answer is yes. We've done a lot of business already, which has got people very excited. I was saying this the other day, I'm a little bit petrified because I'm not used to this level of transfer wheeler dealing with Liverpool. We're certainly not used to it under FSG to this sort of level. And the fact that a lot of the business has been done so early in the transfer window as well, it is encouraging. But, don't get me wrong, it is massively encouraging. And especially when you look at the type of players that have been brought in already. But what is clear is that there's still more work to be done, even though those transfers have already taken place. We've probably got about 6 transfers there, but at least 4 of them were sort of like key ones. But if, Quansah leaving leaves you a bit short in central defence, and there's no way we can start with just 3 centre-backs, I don't think. We've tried that one before in the past, and it didn't go very well, as Jurgen Klopp can testify. But Quansah will need replacing. Canate has got a year left on his contract. I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. If they don't think he's going to sign that, they've got a decision to make as to whether he needs to be sold this summer, or if you end up with another Trent Alexander-Arnold situation where you don't sell him and he just ends up running down his contract. Because I have to say I'm not feeling particularly confident about that situation. So someone's definitely going to have to come in there, I think, as a centre-back. I think if there are other exits as well across, in other areas of the pitch, midfield in particular, maybe the centre forward, you could see Nunes exit. There's going to need to be potentially replacements coming there as well, and they'll want to get the right players. Otherwise, you are juggling the existing squad, which isn't necessarily a bad thing when you look at the quality that Liverpool possess across the front line and also, across the midfield. It might be a case you may see some players playing in roles that we haven't seen them play that regularly. But so I feel like there's more transfers to be done, and that will mean a lot of change over the course of a summer. And don't forget, Liverpool have just won the Premier League title, haven't they? So continuity is always a big thing, but at the same time, you can't stand still when you're winning. Well, Liverpool definitely aren't standing still, but are they going to end up doing too much? I'm not too sure.
I'm not too concerned with them doing too much, really, because I think that as excellent as last season was, the last couple of months maybe underlined that there were a few issues, I think, that needed to be addressed. Obviously, Trent Alexander-Arnold leaving as well was a player that needed to be replaced. Kevin Kelleher even departing. Obviously, Mamardashvili has come in as well. He, as we are recording, I think he's flying into Liverpool at the moment. So, that's another transfer that we're watching and in this busy summer. But I think in terms of the centre-back, what is interesting is there does seem to be a thought from Liverpool that actually they will only make a move in the market if a significant opportunity comes up. And they have clearly laid out strategies in many ways in terms of their centre-back priorities, in terms of how they want to look at the market. And there's a feeling perhaps internally, I think, that actually they can probably get through with 3 centre-backs in Van Dijk, Gomez, Canate, and then, of course, Endo and Gravenberch, who dropped back and played there last season. Now, I would have concerns about that approach personally. I think when you factor in Gomez's injury record as well, I do think that would be a worry in that you could potentially end up in a position where you've only got 2 really recognised centre-backs in the squad if Gomez was to suffer another long-term problem. And I think there's a difference as well between the likes of Endo and Gravenberch dropping in and playing that role every so often and occasionally, rather than playing it week in, week out. We can all remember a few years ago Fabinho dropping in and playing centre-back, and it just didn't really work, did it? So I would be wary of that approach from Liverpool personally. But of course, the player that is dominating all the talk at the moment is Marc Guehi. We know that he is a player of interest to Liverpool, one of a couple of centre-backs actually the club are looking at. Rich, what do you think about him as a potential addition to the squad? Where does he stand in your mind, and do you think he would be a suitable replacement for Jarell Quansah?
Well, first off, I think the idea of Gravenberch or Endo stepping in as a centre-back, it might be something that might work for a game or two, but that's a problem of Liverpool's own making, because they've just sold one of their established, albeit younger, centre-backs. So there's got to be a reason for that beyond just that someone was willing to pay 35 million pounds for him. You know what I mean? So I find it improbable that they won't at least bring one centre back in. And in terms of Guehi, he's the standout candidate. I think he's someone who is going to come in, and he's not just going to be an understudy. He's going to put pressure on Konate to establish himself alongside Virgil van Dijk, and who knows, in turn, maybe replace Van Dijk, who's obviously signed a new contract, but is in the latter stages of his career, 2 years left on his contract. As I think I said on a previous pod, Van Dijk and Salah might have signed these new contracts, but already the process has got to start now to replace them because they are not going to go forever. So I think he would be an ideal player. He's got all the qualities you need to play for Liverpool. He's at a good moment in his career. He's well respected, and he certainly wouldn't be coming in just to make up the numbers. Whether that would ruffle a few feathers with someone like Konate, I don't know. It's not really our problem, though, is it? It's better to have three very good centre backs than two, and that's no disrespect to Joe Gomez there either. But if you're going to stay at the top of the tree, you need to have the best players, and I think it's not just sort of making sure you've got those quota of centre backs and also potentially replacing Konate, but even looking a little bit longer term with Van Dijk as well.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, you mentioned that Van Dijk and Salah point, and that is a good point. I mean, I just touched on Mamardashvili. I mean, that is essentially what's happening with Alisson, isn't it? He is the long-term plan to replace him. So it's certainly something that Liverpool have got to be wary of. And Konate is another factor in this. With his contract running down, we're not totally sure where negotiations are at, but certainly they've not been moving forward and progressing in the last year or so. So it is a bit of an uncertain position, I think, long term. And I do agree with you that they need additions in that position. I think he would be a good choice, and not to repeat too much of last week's podcast, but my only concern would be, is he just quite ready? If there was an injury, is he quite ready to start week in, week out for Liverpool? I don't know. So anyway, we'll see on that one, but plenty to get through. And as I mentioned at the start, a very busy day of transfer news, because we know that Bayern Munich have made an approach for Liverpool winger Luis Diaz. Now, it's been a really interesting summer for Diaz, of course, in terms of his position at Liverpool. At the start of the summer, he spoke about how he plans to negotiate a new contract with the club. But since then, well, there hasn't really been much progress on that matter. Liverpool, from their perspective, they don't have any plans to sell Luis Diaz, but he has a lot of interest, particularly from Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and of course in Saudi Arabia. So it's a really interesting conundrum, I suppose, for Liverpool, that this interest in a player who played regularly last season, played 36 of the 38 Premier League games. But there maybe is a feeling that if he was to leave, you've obviously got Gakpo and Salah in the two wings. You just brought in Frimpong, who can play in the attacking positions. You still have Federico Chiesa, although obviously hasn't really had much of an impact so far. So I wonder what your thoughts are, Rich. Would he be a player that you would potentially consider cashing in on it if a sufficient offer did come?
I am a Luis Diaz fan. Let's make that clear from the off. So if you did cash in him, for me personally, you need to be looking to bring in a replacement as a result of that. It wouldn't just be a case of, we're just going to play Cody Gakpo. For me, you know what I mean? We didn't definitely need to be a reason to sell him. I wouldn't feel comfortable just selling him just to make a bit of money on him, although the FSG accountants may agree to differ on that one. I think Diaz is one of, for the role he has in the team, he's definitely one of Liverpool's lower earners. So it's no surprise that he's looking for a new contract. And I'm sure he will be of the mindset, well, if Liverpool don't want to give me a new contract, I'll go somewhere else where they will give me one. I don't think it's really a secret that he admires Barcelona, and like a lot of South American players, they all have shared aspirations to at some point play for either Barcelona or Real Madrid. So I think if Barca's situation was a little bit better, and they were pushing more and able to do a deal on the money that he wanted, I could see that happening. Bayern Munich's a little bit different. Is that somewhere he really wants to go? I don't know. Really, it's sort of a new name this week, and not somewhere he was previously linked. But I just don't see why, if Liverpool don't want to cash in on him now, I don't see why they wouldn't just offer him a new contract. It doesn't sit right. I mean, well, how much if you want to be valued in the workplace, and this is the nature of the industry that you work in, then he's probably at a point where, well, I've given you good service. I'm not on as good contract as maybe some other key players in the team. Maybe now's the time to have a look at that. And if not, then, we've sort of answered the question for him.
Yeah. And I think there is obviously, you and I aren't professional footballers, but I do think that the players, and it's an important factor for players. I'm not suggesting there is an ego element there, but players want to be on the same salary as their peers and their players who are in the same status that as them.
Oh, they've all got egos.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, you said that, not me, but I'm not implying that is the case with Diaz. But in any line of work, you want to be paid what the same as your colleague is, or someone who's doing the same level of work as you. And I think that perhaps maybe there is a slight sense of frustration there, and perhaps maybe even feeling a tiny little bit undervalued from Diaz's perspective. And I do think it's intriguing that there seems to be this sense that Liverpool aren't planning to enter into contract negotiations, aren't planning to sell him. That is a very peculiar position for a player who is very important to the Liverpool team, has played a really important role over a number of years. And he's only 28. I mean, it's not as if he's, pushing into his 30s. So it's a really intriguing transfer saga. One I think that's going to run on because he has so much interest in him that, if it was only one club, you could maybe see this one being done and dusted. But Bayern, Barca, Al Nassr as well, if reports to be believed, from Saudi Arabia. It'd be a really interesting one that I think will rumble on this summer, and I have a sneaking suspicion it could end with Luis Diaz leaving the club. But let's see on that one. Liverpool are pretty firm in their stance at the moment. They are not planning to sell the player. But another little bit of news that is broken today, of course, is the coaching changes at Liverpool. So we've seen Giovanni van Bronckhorst, of course, a name that we know well, had a fantastic career, didn't he? The Dutch international. I was reading as well today, which I forgot that his final game as a player was in the World Cup final in 2010. I mean, that's not a bad way to sign off, but he has joined Arne Slot as his new assistant, of course, coming in to replace John Heitinga. Rich, do you think these things are particularly important, or do you just think it's, all managers have assistants that sometimes we read too much into the level of importance of these things?
I think both of those things can be true. So Johnny Heitinga had to be replaced, so someone was coming in. But they've brought in someone who, had a pretty successful playing career and has also had a pretty successful managerial career as well. And I think he won the League with Feyenoord as well, so he's got something in common with Arne Slot straight away. And I would gather from that Slot knows him pretty well and feels comfortable bringing someone in, another winner on his, he's got a CV that declares him as a winner. So should fit in quite well in the environment that they're in now. And I know that they've also brought in a goalkeeping coach who was previously with Rafa Benitez. So yeah, I don't think it's anything to shout too loud about, but it's not quite like signing Florian Wirtz or anything. But changes are made in the backroom staff, and he's brought in a couple of people with very good pedigrees, and they will have bought into the sort of ethos that Slot has already implemented very successfully, and it's evolving further as he's making changes, as I said at the start, both on and off the pitch. So the thing with Slot is he's barely put a foot wrong, has he, since he's arrived, which is quite remarkable when you think about how expectations were when Jurgen Klopp left. I mean, just qualifying for the Champions League would have done for me last season, let alone celebrating a 20th league title. So he set a very high bar, Slot, and he'll continue to tweak that now, and it's going to be tough for him to maintain it, but hopefully he can.
Yeah, certainly. It'll be interesting to see what sort of impact Van Bronckhorst does have, of course, as well. I think it's quite a coup, really, bringing in a former manager, obviously managing the Dutch league in Scotland as well with Rangers, to come in as an assistant manager. I think it's a really good appointment, actually, I must say, from Liverpool.
Well, he's done the same with Rob Page as well in the under-21s as well, hasn't he? So there's another person who's held a very senior managerial role and had success, relative success with it. So stacking up a lot of winners.
And I do think it speaks to the stature of Liverpool as a club. I don't think it's every club that would be able to attract these sorts of figures to come in as not in a shining lead role, shall we say. I do think it says a lot about Liverpool. But you mentioned it there as well. A couple of changes in the goalkeeping department as well in terms of coaches. Xavi Valero coming back to the club, was previously a goalkeeping coach during Rafa Benitez's time at the club. That means that Fabian Ott, who joined actually last year, has moved on, and Claudio Taffarel, obviously a long-term goalkeeper, goalkeeping coach with Alisson, both at club and international level. And it's part of what's been a big change in terms of the goalkeeping department this summer. They're going into all the ins and outs. 3 goalkeepers in, 3 goalkeepers out. Rich, final kind of point of the day. Any thoughts on the goalkeeping changes?
Are they happening ahead of the eventual exit of Liverpool's greatest ever goalkeeper? For me, maybe. I don't know. Obviously, things are changing. Mamardashvili has been brought in. I'm sure the idea of coming from Valencia wasn't come and sit on our bench, was it? They definitely believe that they've identified a talent who could potentially be Liverpool's next Alisson Becker. And they will sort of bring in coaches around them that should be able to help him move on to that next level. So I don't think it's a massive deal for Alisson, given the level that he plays at anyway. And I think it wouldn't really. I don't think it would really matter too much who his goalkeeper coach was next season. He could probably teach the goalkeeper coach how to coach a goalkeeper, to be honest with you. So I don't think that'll have a massive impact on him. But I do wonder if some of these changes are sort of giving us an insight into what the future might look like. And it might be one with a different goalkeeper between the sticks next season. The season after next.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I don't think they'll impact him in the short term, certainly, with his level of experience. But you do wonder, Alisson, as he's starting to, he's going to be 33 next season, probably something with his long-term future. Suddenly you look around you, it's been all change over the last couple of years. You just maybe don't feel quite as familiar and comfortable as you did 2 or 3 years ago. Could you perhaps start thinking about where you're going to be in a year or two? But yeah, probably one for a podcast further down the line. But that is it for us today on the Liverpool.com podcast, an extremely busy day of Liverpool news. Thanks very much, Rich, for chatting to us. I've been Michael Plant, your host, and we'll be back next week for the latest episode of the Liverpool.com podcast.